If you listen to jazz players really take it to the next level, they're superimposing different melodies that imply totally foreign harmonies over these chords. And that's actually the sort of jazz that most of us, when we listen to it, we go, oh man, I wish I could do that. You know, boy, Chris Potter, listen to him play. How does he sound so good? And so in this case, this is a very, very simplified version of that. You hit an F minor, but you got... So immediately there's a bit of tension there. But it's okay, it sounds great. The same with the fourth measure of the second example here. We hit an F7, and right away there's a B flat there. Now I've had students who come up to me and they say, well, I'm confused. On a dominant, is that the one where I use Lydian? Is that with the sharp 4? And I say, oh, yeah, well, you know what? It can be anything. It's very hard to start plugging in a mode into one particular chord, because again, it has to do with context. In this context, the B flat sounds great. It sounds like it was meant to be. And that's, again, because of the parent scale for this chord progression. Just take a look at that B flat out of context. You know, if you went to Berklee College of Music, they would put that on their, no-fly list for notes. The fourth is, it's banned. I understand that. I really do understand setting parameters for students. I set them for myself all the time as a student of all this stuff myself. But to me, it's also tough, because if you start saying, well, you can never do that, then what about this example where we get to the last two bars and we hear in context, and we say, oh man, that's perfect. Now let's listen to it with two A's at the end. To me, it's a little thuddy. I want it to go up to that B flat just for a second and then back down. This is what I think of as a musical line breathing. There's a chance for balance here. We're dealing with chord tones, sometimes on the beats, and sometimes non-chord tones. And if you played a solo that was always... not that that would necessarily be bad, but I'll tell you what, it would get old really quick. So you could hear that for 4 measures, and then you would start to say to yourself, what else can I do? So let's move on to the next couple examples. We have a few other chord progressions here. This next chord progression shows up a lot in vamps, like at the beginning of songs. You'll see this. All of these, by the way, show up a ton in jazz band charts. Immediately from junior high all the way through college. So this chord progression. Common like a fast tempo, Let's slow this down again, and we'll try this with just again, it's the same beginning, because that's our chord, and then we'll hear what happens to the top. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is one of these questions that comes up a lot. You probably know what the question is. But D flat major? I know my circle. D flat major? That doesn't have a G in it. That has a G flat in it. And so I thought if you switch over to a D flat major, you're going to flip over to. But this is really a case again where the ear tells you, and the ear says. So what does this mean? It just means, again, that the parent melody rules the day, and all the extra notes in that chord are attached to that initial melody.
Can we try it the other way? Just take the last few measures and I'll play it with the G flat.
Yeah, that'll be nice. And let's do it straight eighths, like a bossa. 1, 2, 3, 4. major scale is, but he's not using an internal logic, whether by ear or with his head. What was the parent anyway? And this happens a lot. We look at a chord progression, and all of a sudden things change, and we go with it, and then we hear some amazing player solo on the same thing, and they haven't moved at all. They've moved maybe up a note or down a note. And we think, wow, again, how does he make it so easy? So in this case, D flat major 7 could have been written as D flat major 7 sharp 11, which is really, I guess how that chord could be notated. But the bottom line is everyone plays it as a sharp 11. That's just a, you're not going to meet any jazz band somewhere that's going to play a G flat at that point. Again, because it's associated with the C minor. So the last example here in this series takes one more really familiar chord progression. This is C minor 7 going to A flat major 7. Let's try it with the melody. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is another example of that G on the 4th measure being a primary note in the melody. And as we ascend, we hit another sharp 11, which is that D. Normally you would think of an A flat major as having a D flat in it. But again, is really what the voice leading is dictating. And we're not going to get into chords really being governed by voice leading, but that's really where all this comes from. It's this idea that the chord symbol that is just put on there is just an approximation of how the inner voices are working in a melody anyway. So it's important to keep in mind that when we see a chord symbol, it always changes depending on context. I mean, you can, as the student gets going with this, maybe there are some parallels or certain things come up a lot, but I want to show you real quick, if you look at a C major scale, you can fragment this guy in the exact same way that we fragmented the minor pentatonic. You've got the top half, we're going to put it on the bottom. And all of a sudden we have a little, kind of like Mozart thing. It's just a major scale, it's reordered, but all of a sudden there's music there, and it's kind of nice. So actually when I teach the major scale to any of my students, we have to start off knowing what whole half means and all of that, but very quickly, if we want to improvise on it, we immediately take the top half and put it on the bottom, because you've just got a whole lot of flexibility that way as a soloist. Think, if you take the upper fragment, you go down, C, B, A, G, and you go up to the top, and you play 2 notes. What a beautiful melody. There's no way that the student would have thought of that if he looked at a major scale the way we normally see it printed. So playing around just with some of these visuals can really trigger really fresh ideas. Kind of have to hurry because it's been a long day. We're getting close to the end here. But I want to give you a couple of examples to take with you on how to take all of this stuff and apply it to the blues. I think this is important because all of us as directors, we're dealing with a whole lot of blues coming through as a vehicle to solo on. And it's nice to know that there are other approaches rather than just laying down the blues scale. I use minor pentatonic instead of blues because that sharp 4 is a color tone anyway. That's how it came up in history. The blues scale is a fabricated scale. The pentatonic is not.